Have you ever wondered why the Apostle Paul, in the midst of his imprisonment, wrote a letter so filled with joy? Welcome to our exploration of the book of Philippians. Emerging from the ancient city of Philippi, a letter penned by the Apostle Paul radiates with an uncommon joy and unity, a beacon of hope in the face of adversity. This is the book of Philippians, a cornerstone of the New Testament and a testament to the indomitable spirit of its author. The Apostle Paul, an ardent follower of Christ and a key figure in the spread of early Christianity, is the acknowledged author of Philippians. His words, however, were not written from the comfort of a serene study, but from the harsh confines of a Roman prison. Despite his grim circumstances, Paul's letter to the Philippians is imbued with a joyful spirit, a testament to his unwavering faith and the transformative power of Christ's love. But what makes this letter so special? What themes resonate through its verses, echoing down the corridors of time to us here today? Firstly, Philippians is a book of joy. Amidst hardship and suffering, Paul's words ring out with an unshakable joy, a joy rooted in his faith in Christ. This joy, Paul asserts, is available to all who accept Christ into their hearts. Secondly, Philippians speaks of unity. Paul urges the Philippians to stand together, to be of one mind, one spirit, united in their love for Christ and for one another. Unity, Paul implies, is a powerful force capable of overcoming even the most formidable obstacles. Lastly, the book of Philippians underscores the humility of Christ. Through the example of Christ's selfless sacrifice, Paul encourages the Philippians, and indeed all of us, to adopt a similar attitude of humility and selflessness. In its 4 short chapters, the book of Philippians encapsulates the essence of Christian living: joy in the face of adversity, unity in diversity, and humility as a way of life. Now, we begin our journey by delving into the first chapter of Philippians. Chapter 1 of Philippians presents a fascinating perspective on suffering and the advancement of the gospel. In this first chapter, we find ourselves immersed in the world of the Apostle Paul as he pens this letter from a prison cell. Yet, despite his circumstances, Paul's tone is anything but gloomy. Instead, he exudes a joy that seems almost paradoxical in the face of his suffering. The central message of this chapter shines through in Paul's affirmation of his joy in the midst of suffering. He sees his imprisonment not as a setback, but as an opportunity for the gospel to advance. His chains have become a beacon, drawing others to the message of Christ. It's a striking perspective, one that challenges us to reconsider how we view adversity in our own lives. But Paul doesn't stop there. He goes on to emphasize the importance of living for Christ. For Paul, life is Christ. Everything he does, every breath he takes, is for the sake of Christ. He is fully dedicated to serving Christ and sharing his message with others. It's a powerful testament to his faith and his commitment to the gospel. Paul's words serve as a reminder that our lives should be lived in the service of something greater than ourselves. Whether we're facing hardship or prosperity, our focus should remain steadfast on Christ. This is the joy that Paul speaks of, a joy that transcends circumstances and fuels our purpose. What's more, Paul's joy in his suffering isn't born from some masochistic delight in pain. Rather, it springs from his certainty in the gospel's power and his unwavering confidence in Christ's redemptive work. It's a joy rooted in faith and hope, a joy that perseveres in the face of adversity. In essence, chapter 1 of Philippians presents us with a powerful message about joy, suffering, and the transformative power of the gospel. It's an invitation for us to reevaluate our perspectives, to find joy in our trials, and to live our lives fully dedicated to Christ. As we transition into the second chapter, we find Paul elaborating more on the theme of unity and humility. Chapter 2 of Philippians is a beautiful passage that illustrates the humility of Christ and the unity of believers. As we delve into the second chapter, we encounter what scholars frequently refer to as the Christ hymn. This hymn, narrated in verses 6 through 11, paints a vivid picture of Christ's humility. It tells us how Christ, despite being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be exploited. Instead, he emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant, humbling himself and becoming obedient to the point of death. This profound display of humility serves as an invitation for all believers to adopt a similar mindset. The Christ hymn is not merely a theological exposition, but a call to action. Paul instructs the Philippians to let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. This call for unity, for having the same love, and being in full accord and of one mind is a central theme of this chapter. It encourages believers to look not to their own interests, but to the interests of others, mirroring the selflessness of Christ. Paul brings this message home through the examples of Timothy and Epaphroditus. Timothy, Paul's beloved and faithful co-worker in the Lord, genuinely cares for the Philippians' welfare, setting himself apart from others who seek their own interests. Epaphroditus, on the other hand, is depicted as a brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier who was ill and nearly died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help the Philippians could not give Paul. These examples serve as practical illustrations of living out the humility and unity that Paul calls for. In essence, chapter 2 of Philippians is a poetic and profound call for unity in humility, modeled after Christ and exemplified in the lives of Timothy and Epaphroditus. In chapter 3, Paul shifts his focus to the dangers of legalism and the importance of knowing Christ. Chapter 3 of Philippians warns us about legalism and highlights the surpassing worth of knowing Christ. As we delve into chapter 3, we find Paul's words take a turn. He begins by cautioning against the Judaizers, a group of people who advocated for the adherence to Old Testament law as a means to salvation. They were legalists, believing that righteousness could be achieved through strict observance of the law. But Paul, once a Pharisee himself, vehemently refutes this notion. He insists that no amount of law-keeping can lead to salvation. Instead, he emphasizes that it's only through faith in Christ that one can be saved. Paul then gives us a glimpse into his own life, sharing his personal testimony. He was once a zealous persecutor of the church, a man who prided himself on his blameless adherence to the law. But on the road to Damascus, everything changed. He met Christ and realized the futility of his past efforts in trying to achieve righteousness. From that point on, he counted all his previous achievements as rubbish compared to the surpassing worth of knowing Christ. This brings us to the heart of chapter 3. Paul's call to press on toward the goal of knowing Christ. He uses the analogy of a race, urging believers not to dwell on past accomplishments or failures, but to keep their eyes on Christ. The goal, he insists, is not about achieving perfection in this life, but about knowing Christ more deeply and becoming more like him. Paul's words are not just for believers in his time, but resonate with us today. They remind us that our worth is not in our achievements or our ability to follow rules, but in our relationship with Christ. They challenge us to press on, to keep running the race, to keep seeking to know Christ more and more. As we move into the final chapter, we find Paul's concluding exhortations and thanks. Chapter 4 of Philippians, the final chapter, offers practical advice on living a life of joy and peace. Here, Paul's words ring with a sense of resilience and hope as he communicates his guidance to the people of Philippi. His exhortations are not just spiritual, but also practical, grounded in the daily experiences of life. Firstly, he exhorts them to rejoice. Not once but twice he urges, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say, rejoice." This is not a call to ignore life's challenges or difficulties, but rather to find joy in the Lord amidst them. It's a joy that is not dependent on circumstances, but on the unchanging nature of God. Then he encourages them to pray. "Do not be anxious about anything," Paul writes, "but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." Here he reminds us that prayer is not just about asking for help, but also about expressing gratitude. It's about cultivating a relationship with God, where we bring our fears, our dreams, our hopes, and our thanks. Furthermore, Paul encourages his readers to dwell on what is good. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things, he writes. This isn't just about positive thinking. It's about shaping our minds and hearts through the things we choose to focus on. Lastly, Paul expresses his gratitude for the Philippians' support. Despite his circumstances, he thanks them for their generosity, showing us a model of gratitude and contentment. Paul concludes with a final greeting, a farewell filled with grace and peace, a reflection of the very themes he's been writing about. His words serve as a reminder that we can live lives of joy, peace, and unity, regardless of our circumstances. The book of Philippians, though written in chains, is a powerful testament to the joy and unity found in Christ. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Paul's joyful letter to the Philippians.